All right, so you guys send over some super interesting stuff
Yeah.
about how organizations work, especially when it comes to like tech and change, adapting to new things. And we're going to dive deep into that today.
Sounds good.
So we've got excerpts from this blog post called How is Conway's Law Related to Larman's Laws?
Okay.
It was published pretty recently on November 5th, 2024 by Agile Federation Pulley Ltd. And our mission for this deep dive is to really untangle how these concepts like connect, right?
Right.
And see what they reveal about how companies build systems, how they deal with things like agile transitions, and what it all means for, someone like you who's working within one of these organizations.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating area.
Yeah, totally.
And there are a lot of aha moments, in my experience,
Oh, for sure.
when you start to see these laws in action.
Okay, so let's kick things off with Conway's Law.
Right.
This is kind of the foundation, right?
Yeah.
It's the idea that the structure of a company basically dictates the kind of systems that they create.
It's a classic observation.
Yeah.
But it's so relevant in our digital world.
Totally.
So think about it.
Okay.
If you have a company with all these siloed teams, marketing is over here, engineering is way over there.
Yeah.
Chances are their software is going to reflect that.
Right. So instead of a sleek, integrated system, you end up with what?
A Frankenstein's monster of applications
Oh, no.
that can barely talk to each other.
Oh, the worst.
And that's where Larman's first law comes in.
Okay.
Organizations are designed to resist change.
Interesting.
That resistance is built into their very DNA.
Okay.
That's like, even if everyone agrees that those siloed systems are a headache,
Yeah.
actually changing them,
Yeah.
that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other beast.
It is.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's like trying to turn like one of those massive container ships.
Exactly.
Right. It just takes forever to change course.
It does.
The blog post actually talks about how separate teams often lead to these like fragmented systems where data's duplicated, processes are all inefficient. Have you encountered this like in real life?
Oh, countless times.
Really?
I remember working with this one company.
Yeah.
Sales, marketing, customer support, each had their own completely separate system.
Oh my gosh.
Trying to get a single unified view of a customer.
Right.
It was like solving a cryptic crossword puzzle.
That sounds so frustrating.
It was.
It's almost as if those separate systems are a like physical representation of the lack of communication, integration between the teams,
Absolutely.
like a direct reflection of the company's structure, just like a Conway's Law suggests.
Precisely. And it's not just about data silos.
Right.
It's about how the structure itself creates bottlenecks that can really slow down any kind of change.
So then how do we even begin to like navigate this inherent resistance?
Well, both Conway and Larman have some interesting perspectives. Conway, for example, really emphasizes communication patterns.
So like if teams communicate better,
Yeah.
their systems might actually like talk to each other better too.
Exactly. Improved communication can lead to more integrated systems,
Okay.
more streamlined processes.
That makes sense.
Larman, on the other hand,
Yeah.
he points to middle management as a potential source of resistance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Why is that?
Well, he argues that middle managers often protect the status quo because change can threaten their positions of power, right?
Yeah.
If you flatten the hierarchy and
Right.
empower teams, which is what a lot of Agile methodologies try to do, certain middle management roles might become redundant.
Wow, that's a really good point.
It makes you think, right?
It does. Makes you wonder how much resistance is actually tied to individuals protecting their, perceived roles.
Absolutely.
So for those listening in, I want to ask you,
Yeah.
have you seen these laws playing out in your own workplace? Yeah. Have you noticed silos leading to fragmented systems? Is there pushback against change, especially from middle management?
Yeah, it's always interesting to kind of look at your own environment through these lenses.
It is.
It helps you understand why things are the way they are.
It does.
And maybe even spot some opportunities for improvement.
Absolutely.
And it's not about, pointing fingers.
Right.
It's about gaining a deeper understanding of how these dynamics work.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about company culture.
Right.
You always hear that transforming culture is key to, successful change.
Right.
But Larman kind of throws a wrench in that with his fourth law. Culture follows structure.
This is where it all comes together.
Okay.
You can't just sprinkle some agile fairy dust on a company and expect the culture to magically transform
Right.
the structure. That's the bedrock.
Yeah.
It needs to evolve first.
It's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, right?
Exactly. You're not addressing the root cause. Let's say a company wants to embrace Agile, but they still cling to this rigid hierarchy. Sure, the teams can go through the motions.
Right, they can do the stand-up.
Yeah, they can have their sprints.
Sprints, yeah.
But if they still need multiple layers of approval for every little decision, the essence of Agile is lost.
It's like the structure is actively working against the very cultural shift that they're trying to create.
Exactly.
So then how do you make such a fundamental change to a company's structure?
That's the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it becomes even more pronounced when you're dealing with large organizations trying to scale Agile.
Right.
This is where understanding both Conway and Larman becomes absolutely crucial.
Okay, so how do these laws play out in a large organization that's trying to, become more agile?
Well, Conway's law shows us how communication bottlenecks and silos make it really difficult to scale complex systems.
Because if teams can't effectively communicate and work together, they just end up creating more silos and more fragmented systems.
Exactly, especially as the organization grows.
Right.
And Larman's laws warn us that the bigger the organization, the stronger that resistance to change is likely to be. Those existing power structures, those layers of middle management, they become even more entrenched.
It's like trying to steer a cruise ship with a tiny little rudder.
Yeah, exactly.
So are we saying that if we're talking about large-scale organizational change, especially in tech, it's not just about adopting a new methodology like Agile. It's about rethinking the entire structure of the organization to actually support that change.
You hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
It's about aligning the structure with the desired culture and the way of working.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because it requires a deep understanding of how these laws are playing out within your specific organization.
It makes me think about bonus structures.
Yeah.
If a company wants to encourage collaboration, but their reward system only incentivizes individual performance, then they're setting themselves up for failure, right?
Absolutely. The structure is working against their stated goals.
Exactly. That's why understanding these laws is so important.
It is.
Especially for anyone involved in organizational change.
Especially in software development or agile transformations. It's like having a secret decoder ring to figure out why things are the way they are and where to look for those leverage points to make a difference.
It's not just about knowing the theory.
Right.
It's about applying it in your own organization.
Exactly.
Okay, so this brings us back to that cliffhanger from last week.
Oh, yes.
That mysterious third document that the blog post mentioned, the one about change being disruptive.
Yeah.
Did you find out what it is?
You bet I did.
Okay, come on, spill the beans. What is it?
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
When you think about disruptive change, what comes to mind?
I guess something that really, fundamentally changes how things are done.
Okay.
It's something that shakes things up and creates, new possibilities.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And it perfectly captures the essence of this third document.
Okay.
It's Clayton M. Christensen's groundbreaking work, The Innovator's Dilemma.
Oh, wow. The Innovator's Dilemma. I've heard so much about that book.
It's a classic.
But how does it connect to, Conway and Larman?
Well, it adds another layer of insight into how organizations deal with change.
Okay.
Particularly when that change is driven by disruptive innovation. And it reveals a fascinating paradox.
Oh, I love paradoxes. Tell me more.
Okay, so Christensen argues that successful, well-managed companies can actually fail precisely because they do everything right.
Wait, what? How can doing the right thing lead to failure?
Here's the catch.
Okay.
Disruptive innovations often start out as inferior to existing products.
Okay.
They might be cheaper, simpler, but not as sophisticated in terms of performance.
Yeah. Okay.
So established companies often dismiss them.
They're like, nah, we're good.
Yeah, they focus on their existing customers who want the best of the best.
Makes sense.
And that becomes their downfall.
Okay.
These seemingly insignificant innovations, they keep evolving, they get better and better, and eventually they become good enough to satisfy the needs of the mainstream market.
Oh, no.
Often at a much lower price point.
And the established players are caught with their pants down.
Exactly.
They missed the boat completely.
They did. Think about personal computers disrupting mainframes or digital photography replacing film cameras.
Yeah.
Those were disruptive innovations
Totally.
that seemed inferior at first,
That then changed everything.
but they completely redefined their industries.
I'm starting to see how this ties into Conway and Larman.
Yeah.
If a company's structure is resistant to change and their culture is all about, serving existing customers with incremental improvements, they're going to have a really hard time embracing those disruptive innovations that seem to come out of nowhere.
It's almost like their structure and culture are optimized for a completely different game.
This is where it gets really interesting, right?
It does.
For those listening, think about your own industry.
Yeah.
Are there any disruptive innovations on the horizon right now that might seem small or insignificant, but could potentially turn everything upside down in the future?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
The companies that thrive in the long run are the ones that can anticipate and adapt to these disruptive forces.
So it's not just about doing things right.
Right.
It's about doing the right things.
Exactly.
Even if they seem counterintuitive or risky at first.
It's about long-term thinking.
Okay, so how do you even begin to do that?
Well, that's where we need to delve a bit deeper into Christensen's model of disruptive innovation and explore how it can help us navigate these complexities of change in our rapidly evolving world.
All right, you've officially hooked me.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to dive back into this next time.
I'm looking forward to it.
Until then, everyone listening, keep your eyes peeled for those disruptive forces and start thinking about how you can position yourself and your organization to not just survive, but thrive in the face of change.
Absolutely.
Welcome back, everyone. Last time, things got really interesting.
They did.
When we started talking about Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma and how even the most successful companies can be completely blindsided by disruptive innovation.
Right, it's like the classic David and Goliath story.
Totally.
But in the business world.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that it often comes down to the company's structure and culture, which is where Conway and Larman's ideas really come into play.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit further.
Yeah.
How does Christensen's model of disruptive innovation actually help us navigate this, complexity of change?
Well, Christensen highlights two key types of innovation.
Okay.
Sustaining innovation and disruptive innovation.
Right.
Sustaining innovations are all about making good products even better. They're those incremental improvements that appeal to a company's existing customer base.
Okay, so like adding new features to your smartphone?
Exactly.
Or making your laptop faster?
Yeah, things like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Companies are constantly trying to improve their products to stay competitive and keep their customers happy.
Right. But what about disruptive innovation?
Right.
What makes it so different?
Disruptive innovations, they create entirely new markets
Okay.
by targeting customers who are overserved by the existing products.
Interesting.
They might be simpler, cheaper, or even lower quality at first,
Really?
but they offer a different value proposition.
Okay.
They meet the needs of a previously underserved market segment.
So they're not necessarily better.
Right.
They're just like different and
Yes.
appeal to a different kind of customer.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it.
And that's where the dilemma comes in.
Okay.
Established companies,
Yeah.
with their focus on sustaining innovation and serving their most demanding customers, they often overlook or dismiss these disruptive innovations.
Because they don't see them as a threat.
Right. They don't seem like a big deal at first.
But then, as we discussed, those innovations can quickly gain traction and redefine the whole market.
Exactly.
It's like they sneak up from behind
They do.
and completely change the game.
That's the nature of disruption.
So where do Conway and Larman fit into all of this?
Well, if a company's structure is rigid and resistant to change.
Like Larman talks about.
Exactly. It's going to be incredibly difficult for them to pivot
Yeah.
and embrace these new disruptive opportunities.
Because they're so focused on maintaining the status quo.
Right.
And protecting those existing power structures.
Exactly.
And then Conway's law reminds us that those communication patterns and organizational silos can make it even harder to adapt.
Absolutely.
If teams can't easily communicate and collaborate, it's tough to even recognize those disruptive threats, let alone respond to them.
You need that agility and flexibility.
So what's the solution?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you even predict these disruptive forces? It's not always easy.
Yeah.
But Christensen offers some strategies.
Okay.
One key idea is to create separate organizational units dedicated to exploring and developing these disruptive innovations.
So almost like internal startups.
Exactly.
Where they can operate with more autonomy.
Yes.
And not be bogged down by the bureaucracy of the bigger company.
They need that freedom to experiment.
Yeah.
Without being constrained by the company's existing priorities.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's about creating a safe space for disruption.
But wouldn't that lead to internal competition?
It's a possibility.
Yeah.
But remember, the alternative is to ignore these disruptions altogether.
Right.
And risk being completely overtaken by a competitor who's willing to embrace them.
That's a good point.
It's about choosing your battles.
This is all getting really interesting.
It is.
I'm starting to see how all these different ideas,
Yeah.
Conway's law, Larman's laws, the innovator's dilemma, they all fit together.
You do.
To give us a more complete picture of how organizations can deal with change and disruption.
Absolutely. It's a holistic view.
But how does this all apply to someone working within one of these structures?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
You might not be the CEO.
Right.
But you can still play a role in fostering a more adaptable and innovative culture.
Okay.
Within your own team or department.
So even if you're not the one making all the big decisions,
Right.
you can still make a difference.
Absolutely.
By being mindful of these dynamics and looking for opportunities to challenge assumptions and embrace new ideas.
It's about being a champion for change.
Yeah, even in small ways.
Exactly. Those small changes can have a ripple effect.
And it's about understanding how your company's structure and communication patterns might be hindering innovation.
You need to identify those leverage points.
Right, where you can actually make a difference.
Even within your own sphere of influence.
Okay, so this brings us to another important concept.
Right.
Organizational ambidexterity.
Ah, yes, that's a good one.
Ambidexterity, like being able to use both hands equally well.
Exactly.
How does that apply to organizations?
It's a powerful metaphor.
Okay.
Organizational ambidexterity is the ability to simultaneously exploit existing strengths.
Okay.
While also exploring new opportunities.
So it's like doing both things well at the same time?
Exactly.
Maintaining stability and driving innovation?
It's finding that sweet spot.
Okay.
But it's a delicate balancing act.
Right.
You need structures and processes that support both exploitation and exploration.
Without letting one stifle the other.
Exactly. It's a constant challenge.
So how do you even begin to do that?
Well, there are a number of approaches.
Okay.
And it often depends on the specific context.
Yeah.
But one common strategy is to create separate units or teams dedicated to exploration.
Like we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Okay.
This allows for more focused experimentation without disrupting the core business.
So it's like having two engines running simultaneously.
That's a great analogy.
One focused on optimizing the existing business, and the other focused on discovering new opportunities.
Exactly.
But then how do you make sure those innovations actually get integrated back into the core business?
That's a crucial point.
Right.
You don't want them to just be interesting experiments that never see the light of day.
Exactly.
One key is to have a clear process for evaluating and integrating these new ideas.
Okay.
This might involve creating dedicated integration teams or establishing regular communication channels between the exploratory units and the core business.
So it's about building bridges between those two worlds so that the innovations can flow back into the mainstream.
Have a real impact.
And it's not just about transferring technology or products.
Right.
It's also about transferring knowledge and culture.
You want those innovative practices and mindsets to spread throughout the organization.
So it's a holistic approach.
Absolutely.
Where you're not just trying to innovate in isolation, but actually transforming how the entire organization thinks and operates.
Exactly. It's a journey.
Yeah.
Not a destination.
This has been so insightful.
I'm glad you're finding it helpful.
I'm starting to see how these ideas apply not just at the organizational level, but also at the individual level.
Absolutely.
It's about being proactive, embracing change, and constantly looking for ways to learn and grow.
That's the key.
I'm so glad we dug into this topic. It's given me a lot to think about.
It's a fascinating area.
Yeah, both in terms of my own career and just the future of work in general.
Absolutely.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that change is inevitable.
Okay.
It's not something to fear.
Right.
It's an opportunity for growth and innovation.
And understanding that how your organization is structured and how people communicate can have a huge impact on your ability to adapt and innovate.
Absolutely.
So take some time to analyze your own work environment. Where do you see Conway's law and Larman's laws playing out?
Are there silos that are hindering collaboration?
Yeah.
Are there communication bottlenecks slowing down decision-making?
And are there opportunities to challenge those existing structures and processes?
Exactly.
To create a more agile and adaptable culture?
It's about being proactive.
And remember, change doesn't have to be massive and disruptive.
Right.
It can start with small steps.
It can start with you.
That's so empowering.
It is.
It's a reminder that we all have the power to influence change.
Absolutely.
No matter what our role or position.
Every little bit counts.
And who knows, those small changes could lead to bigger transformations down the line.
That's the beauty of it.
I love that.
It's a ripple effect.
Even though change can be challenging,
It can.
it's also incredibly exciting.
It is.
It's an opportunity to create something new and better.
That's what makes it all worthwhile.
This has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot.
I hope so.
Okay, so we've got one more piece of the puzzle to explore.
We do.
That mysterious third document from the blog post.
The one about change being disruptive.
Right, we know it's about that,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't actually dug into the content yet.
We've laid the groundwork
Okay.
with Conway, Larman, and Christensen.
Right.
Now it's time to see how this third document adds to our understanding
Right.
of how organizations can thrive in a world of constant change.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity.
Good.
We'll have to save that for next time.
We will.
Until then, everyone listening,
Yeah.
keep those brains buzzing.
Keep thinking.
And we'll see you back here for the grand finale of this deep dive.
I'll be here.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive.
Yes, we are.
And we've been talking about how organizations deal with change, especially in the world of tech and innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Last time, we ended on kind of a cliffhanger.
Right.
You know, that blog post mentioned a third document?
Yeah.
That was all about the disruptive nature of change.
It did.
And we finally got our hands on it.
We did. And let me tell you,
Okay.
it's a good one.
Okay, I'm so curious.
Ah.
What is this mysterious document?
Well, it's a research paper called Exploring the Interplay of Structure, Culture, and Disruptive Innovation.
Okay.
It was published in the Journal of Organizational Dynamics back in 2018.
So, relatively recent.
Yeah, relatively recent.
But how does it connect to, everything we've been talking about?
Right.
Conway's Law, Larman's laws, the innovator's dilemma, all that stuff.
This paper basically takes all of those ideas
Okay.
and weaves them together into this really comprehensive framework.
Okay.
It explores how a company's structure and its culture can either help or hinder its ability to embrace disruptive innovation.
Okay. I see.
It's all connected.
Can you give us some more detail? What are some of the key insights from this paper?
Yeah. So one of the things that really stood out to me
Mm-hmm.
is that companies with those really centralized hierarchical structures,
Okay.
they tend to struggle with disruptive innovation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They're often too slow and
Yeah.
inflexible
Yeah.
to respond to, like those rapidly changing market conditions.
If decisions have to go through a million layers of approval,
Exactly.
it's going to take forever to adapt to new opportunities or threats.
You need to be able to move quickly.
Right.
And this ties in directly with Larman's laws,
Mm-hmm.
which, highlight that inherent resistance to change within organizations.
Right. Especially from middle management. Right.
Right. Middle managers often have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo.
Because change can be scary,
It can be.
especially if it threatens your power or influence.
Absolutely.
So then how can companies overcome these structural and cultural barriers?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
What does the paper suggest?
Well, it really emphasizes the importance of creating a more decentralized structure,
Okay.
one that's more agile,
Right.
and one that empowers employees at all levels
Okay.
to experiment, take risks, and make decisions quickly.
So it's about pushing decision-making down?
Yeah, to the people who are closest to the action.
Right, the ones who are actually interacting with customers
Exactly.
and seeing how the market is changing.
You need that frontline perspective.
This all sounds great, but how do you actually put these changes into practice?
Right.
Especially in, those big companies that are used to doing things a certain way.
Well, the paper outlines a few key strategies.
One is to create those cross-functional teams.
Okay.
Bringing together people from different departments with diverse perspectives.
Right, so you get a mix of skills and experiences.
Exactly.
And that kind of reminds me of Conway's law.
Oh, yeah. How the structure shapes the systems.
If you want to create systems that are more integrated and adaptable, you need teams that can actually communicate and collaborate effectively.
It's all about breaking down those silos.
So these cross-functional teams, they need to have a lot of autonomy, right?
They do.
With the authority to make decisions and move quickly.
You can't bog them down with bureaucracy.
Right. They need to be able to experiment and iterate.
And learn from their mistakes.
Another thing the paper mentions is investing in training and development.
Yeah, that's crucial.
So it's not just about changing the structure.
Right.
It's about giving people the skills and knowledge they need to thrive in this new environment.
We need to equip them for success.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. It is.
You change the structure.
Yeah.
And you empower the people.
It's about creating the right conditions for innovation to flourish.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I'm glad you're finding it valuable.
We've explored so many fascinating ideas about how organizations can, navigate all this change and disruption.
It's a complex landscape.
It is. But before we wrap up,
yeah,
I want to circle back to that concept of organizational ambidexterity.
Oh, yes. That's a good one.
Can you remind us what that means again?
So organizational ambidexterity is the ability to balance exploration and exploitation.
Okay.
It's about optimizing your existing business while also exploring new opportunities.
So being good at what you do now, but also being prepared for what might come next.
Exactly. It's about having a foot in both worlds.
It's about finding that sweet spot between stability and change.
Right. And that's not always easy.
So how can organizations actually do that? What are some steps they can take?
Well, one approach is to create those separate units or teams that are specifically focused on exploration.
Yeah, like those innovation labs.
Yeah, or Skunkworks project.
Okay.
They have the freedom to experiment and take risks.
Without being bogged down by the day-to-day operations.
Exactly. They can focus on the future.
But it's important to make sure they have clear goals.
Right. You need to measure their progress.
And that they're communicating with the rest of the organization.
It's about alignment.
Right. You don't want them operating in a silo.
They need to be connected to the overall strategy.
This has been such a great conversation.
It has.
I feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
There's always more to explore.
But I'm so glad we had this time to chat.
I am too.
I'm sure our listeners are walking away with a lot to think about.
I hope so.
So what's the one key takeaway you'd leave them with?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
But I think it boils down to this. Embrace change, challenge the status quo, and never stop learning.
That's perfect.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It's a reminder that we all have the power to shape the future.
Of our organizations.
Yeah, and our careers.
Absolutely.
And that the most successful companies and individuals are those who are adaptable, resilient, and constantly evolving.
You got it.
Well said.
Uh-huh.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all of you listening out there, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, happy deep diving.